Why tennis coaches shouldn't practice serve unopposed. Now, it's a common trait, isn't it? Most tennis coaches, when developing the serve with their players, will get a basket of balls, generally the last 10 minutes of a lesson, get their player to serve into the service box and teach him all things technique, elbow position, leg drive, ball toss, the list goes on. This week, I had the pleasure and the privilege of delivering 2 keynote speeches to the Tennis South Africa National Coaches Conference. And today I'm going to share with you part of that keynote speech that I used to close the conference yesterday. Before we get into that, welcome to mytenniscoaching.com. My name is Steve Whelan. As always, it is Friday. We are live at a slightly later time. Had a bit of a lie-in this morning after quite a busy week with the conference. But yes, we are live on YouTube and Facebook, and we also stream the audio across on Spotify as well. I hope you're all well. But yeah, so this week I had the unbelievable honor, privilege to present at the National Tennis Coaches Conference for Tennis South Africa on a virtual conference. And it was really humbling to be, first of all, asked to present some ideas on more efficient and effective coaching, to be part of a panel of coaches that included Davis Cup, Billie Jean King Cup captains, and to be with just a couple of what I consider sort of coaching education sort of legends was really humbling, and also a bit weird that I was the key the main event, if you want to call it the main event. I had the pleasure of closing both days conferences with the keynote speech, and I delivered both speeches on my theories using the ecological dynamics approach and a constraint-led approach. The first day on Wednesday was how to develop more skillful and adaptable players. So rather than using isolated basket feeding techniques, how we can develop technique or movement skill through games. And that went down really, really well. And yesterday, the last day of the conference, day 2, I delivered a presentation on how to develop the serve via play and not developing the serve in isolation. And I'm going to share part of that second presentation with you today. And the feedback's been really positive. So thank you to all the coaches from South Africa who's reached out to me via DM or via email saying how much they enjoyed the presentation. One coach even said yesterday that he was guilty of a lot of the ineffective ways that I highlighted. And he went off to coach last night and he tried some of the new methods. And he said his players, had more fun. And he was really impressed of how quickly the players improved their skill as well. And I was very quickly to point out that, listen, there's lots of different ways to coach. Some of the ways that maybe are ineffective, but very traditional and very common, we've all done. And I said in both presentations yesterday, like I've been really guilty of isolated practices. I've been guilty of basket feeding. I've been guilty of developing the serve in a way which I'm going to show you today with no opponent. Because why? That's how I was taught how to coach, and all the coaches in and around me also taught that way as well. So I don't think there's a right and wrong way. We will all have our beliefs and we'll all have our philosophies. My philosophy is based on experience. It's also based on some research, some sports science, some sports psychology. So I'm quite comfortable in my philosophy. And one question now that I'm asking lots of coaches is, well, why do you coach the way you coach? What's the basis? What's the theory behind your method? And most coaches just base it on, oh, well, that's how I was coached, or that's how I was coached, and I'm trying to do the opposite. Or I don't really know. I'm just sort of copying. Yeah, I'm just copying other people, but I don't really know why. So I think it's important as coaches that we understand the why. So today I'm going to share with you part of the presentation. So please bear with me. We are live. So I am going to share my screen. There we go. So apologies if you're on Spotify, but there's a video on the screen now, but I will talk through it as much as possible. And you can also head over to mytenniscoaching.com and watch the video yourself and sort of see the videos as part of this live stream. But this is how we used to normally or traditionally coach the serve. We get our player on the baseline as seen in the clip, and the player has no opponent down the far side. I'm the coach. I'm just tossing him the balls and he's just serving. He's just serving into the service box. And what we're doing is we're using the measure of the ball going in the box as the outcome. and we're using that as a measure if he's efficient and effective. And at this stage, I could give him hints. Okay, so I might look at his elbow position. Okay, his elbow position, yeah, it's not too bad. It's probably just in line with his shoulder a little bit. It's got like a very much abbreviated take back. So he takes the racket back straight up, doesn't do a traditional goes down and then up, doesn't really use his legs very much. So you could see from a biomechanical point of view, there's quite a lot of work possibly to do here. But he's getting the ball in. He's not missed a serve yet in this clip, and it is 4 to 5 serves on repeat as well. So, yeah, but he's not missed any serves. And this is the way we coach tennis. And the coach's role in this point of view is to stand with the player. And you can see here that I'm walking around the player. I'm getting a view from the front, a view from the side, a view from the back. I'm getting lots of different views on the serve. And this is the way we teach the serve. Very isolated, very styled, very sort of clean and cut. It's not like the game of tennis though. There's a very important thing missing here. One thing we need to serve really efficient and effectively here is information. With that situation, with that closed drill, there's zero information being given. The player has nothing to help him make a decision. So he's got no pressure on him because there's no returner. The ball's not coming back. And he's got the freedom of just hitting the serve. But as we know in tennis is an ever-evolving dynamic space. So what I've got on the screen now, again, apologies on Spotify, but we've got 3 pictures on the screen. Picture on the left shows a escalator. Or travelator, I believe they're called some places in the world. A travelator here in the UK is what we used on gladiators back in the 90s. But anyway, so there's escalators and there's a set of stairs. If you were to use that today, which one would you pick? Would you pick the stairs? Would you pick the escalator? Would you pick the left escalator or would you pick the right escalator? Depending on, obviously, they're both going the same direction. Well, it all depends on you. How you are today will probably just determine which one you'd pick. If you're feeling quite tired, say like me, after a very busy and long week, I'd probably take the escalator. But I might take the right escalator because I'm right-handed. I might take the left escalator because the shops that I want to go to on the left-hand side. I may have 6, 7 coffees and feel really energetic, so I might take the stairs. And maybe, which I currently am, on a bit of a fitness kick and trying to get into shape, so I may take the stairs to get some steps in. But all of us will take that route differently. We'd all make a different decision based on the environment, where we want to go, how we want to get there, and how we feel. And that's very much like serving as well, which I'll come back to in a few moments. In the middle picture, we have a picture of a motorway here in the UK. Just looking at the sign, it's M4 just outside of London. It's pretty work because the M4 is moving there. If you ever sit on the M4 as much as I do, it very rarely moves as well as that. But again, when you're on the motorway, when you're driving, in the picture here, we have 3 lanes. What lane do you choose to be in? When do you choose to change lanes? When do you choose to speed up? When do you choose to slow down? What information do you take in to make those decisions? As tennis players, we take in information all the time. We process the information to help us make decisions. And the last one we have there is a street in New York. And from being in New York late last year, I know what a nightmare it is in some places to walk around. It's so busy with people and traffic. But we got 2 sidewalks, a left and a right. We've got a very busy road. We've got a couple of crossings. We've got multiple chances to cross. What side of the walk do you walk on? Do you go left? Do you go right? When do you choose to cross? So what I'm trying to paint here is a picture that the environment around us will always dictate our movements. It will always dictate the choices that we make. And when we serve without any opponent, when we serve without a returner, we don't have any information. We don't have any information. And it's relatively, it can be easier. So there's less choice, but also it can be also the opposite, where you don't quite know how to hit the serve because you don't know the cause and effect of the serve. You don't know what you're trying to achieve with the serve. You almost go into a destination, but you've not made it quite clear where you want to go with the sat nav. We have to understand that the environment plays a huge part in tennis, and it's something that we don't take into consideration a lot as coaches, the environment. And there's a couple of great presentations from other presenters on the coaches conference, and environment kept coming up. Create the right environment, create a realistic environment. The players learn from their environment. But how often do we actually take into consideration the type of environment we set up? Environment is all around us, but we very rarely sort of take notice of it. But the environment has a huge effect on the player because it will affect their behavior. If we have an unopposed practice where there's no returner, then all of a sudden we introduce a returner, it will change the behavior of the player. The behavior will change because now they've got something else to deal with. You've almost put another object or obstacle in their way. They're going to have to interact with that environment. So it will definitely have a huge effect on the player. Once you affect the behavior of the player, you have to understand it's going to affect the performance. So in our example there of the motorway, if you're driving down the motorway and it's clear and there's very little choice to make, you can just focus on keeping it in a straight line, sticking to the speed limit. But once you start introducing other cars, now you start to got different decisions to make. When do you slow down? When do you speed up? When do you change lanes? How close do you want to risk getting to a car before you want to take over? But when you are going to overtake, you've got to make sure that the environment in the UK, especially on the right, is clear. So that's going to start to affect how you drive once you start to put other people in. If it's really, really busy, like the M25 or M4, and you start getting stressed, that's going to affect how you drive as well. So the environment will affect behavior. Behavior will always affect performance. And that's what I've put on the screen there as well. Changes in the environment will change the behavior. So like I said before, if you're driving down the motorway and it's clear, then all of a sudden you hit a load of traffic, it's going to change how you behave because you're going to have to start making more decisions. You're going to have to start making more adjustments. And how the player interacts with the environment is key. So how does a player handle various different environments when they're serving, for example, which we'll look at now. But again, we've got to understand that when we practice, we have to make that match environment, that practice environment as realistic to the match environment as possible. And we don't. We practice in an unopposed way. We have a server on their own, hitting the serve into the service box. There's no opponent. There's no information. It's a very clean environment. But then all of a sudden they go to a match environment and there's an opponent down the far side. Now, I get a lot of pushback on this. And I've done a few posts on Instagram on this subject as well. And coaches say, yeah, but what if I've got no friends to play with that day? You're telling me that's just a waste of time. Listen, if that's the only thing you've got, then do it. If that's the only way you can hit some serves that day, do it. It will have a small effect on your ability to serve. It will have a small level of improvement, which we'll look at in a few minutes. But if you've got another human being with you on a tennis court, there's no excuse of doing unopposed practice. There's zero excuse. And again, the whole thing about technique, the issue is like when a coach makes these technical suggestions to players, again, if you do it in a situation where it's unopposed, where there's no opponent, you can make the technical adjustments absolutely fine. And the player will probably be able to do the technical adjustments in that time frame, in that space. Once you introduce a returner, the technique's going to change. The movements will change. The behavior will change. So therefore, if you spend 40 hours practicing with no opponent, and then you serve with an opponent, they're not transferable skills. There will be massive changes in the movement and behavior. So you've probably just wasted 40 hours. But if you practice 1 hour a week of hitting serves with no opponent, then fine. But don't be spending 40, 50 hours a week practicing serves. Not that you would, but don't be spending 40, 50 lessons practicing serve without an opponent, because you are then just wasting your time. The skills aren't transferable, which we'll look at in a few minutes. So information's key. The environment is key. So what information does the player take in? Well, the information the player has to take in is the opponent. I need to see where the opponent stands when I'm about to serve. If they start to try and cheat their position and go off towards the outside and they leave a big space at the tee, now I've got an opportunity at tee. It also tells you that they're trying to protect the backhand. Or vice versa, if they go more towards a tee and leave out wide, now I've got more of an opportunity possibly to go out wide, and it's telling me a lot about their forehand. If they stand quite far back, it may show that they're intimidated by my serve. If they're standing quite close, it may show that they don't really think my serve's very good. But I take in that position, and that position of the player changes all the time. It will change through the course of a match. Therefore, my serve will have to adapt and change based on the opponent's position. I may take in consideration the history of the player as well. If I've played against Steve quite a lot and I know his backhand return isn't the greatest, that's going to give me a decision or help me make a decision of maybe going to the backhand more. I may also take into consideration previous points. I keep serving down the tee and Steve keeps smashing that forehand into my backhand corner. It's going to help me then start to make more decisions. Do I keep going to that shot? Or if I do go to that shot, I probably know where the return's going to go. I may also use things like body language of the returner. If the returner is looking really hyped and excited, I may have to really be wary of the return. If they're looking really timid, angry, or upset, I may have an opportunity to apply more pressure now using my return. So I've got to, again, subconsciously we'll do this anyway. But if there's no opponent there, I'm not getting any of this information whatsoever. The score will have a huge effect on my behavior. I will serve differently 40 love up than I will love 40 down. I will feel and serve completely different. I will serve differently in the first set than I probably will in the second and possibly third set. First set, I might be really nervous. Really nervous. I might only have 3 service games and I might lose all 3 service games because I just can't serve. I'm really tight. I can't get the ball toss up. My racket arm isn't flowing. I'm hitting lots of double faults. I then start to relax in the second set and I win the second set and I'm feeling quite confident. But now I get to the third set. I might get tight again. I might stay confident. I might be really tired. And that's going to affect how I move. We really rarely, tennis coaches really think about the psychological effect of how we feel or how physically tired we are on the movement. We will move completely differently. So we can teach players to throw the ball up at 12 o'clock and 1 o'clock all we want. But once you introduce a score or once the body starts to get tired, that movement will change. Then other things as well I've put on the screen there. Conditions. Yeah, the conditions will maybe affect how I move. The court, the bounce. If I'm playing on clay, I may think about using a kick serve more to kick the ball up off the clay and get the ball to bounce higher. If I'm playing on grass, I may use slice more to get the ball to bounce and skid through. So I'll use the court surface to help me make decisions what type of serve. The ball might make a huge effect. So if I'm serving with new tennis balls compared to serving with old tennis balls, it's going to affect my choices with serve. Me personally, I don't like serving with new tennis balls because very rarely as a tennis coach do I use new tennis balls. And every time I get new tennis balls playing a match, I always have a bit of fear because they're going to be lively. Yes, I'm really conscious of I probably don't want to hit it as flat as I would normally would. I've got to maybe generate a bit more spin to keep that ball under control. So the ball's going to have an effect how I serve. The weather, if I'm serving down one end and the wind's against me, and then I change ends and the wind's behind me, it's going to affect how I serve. And that effect is going to have a change in my movement, if you want to call it technique. The crowd, 1 minute, no one's watching me. Next minute, 30 people turn up for adult club session and they're all watching me play points against the coach. I'm going to have a perception and feeling of what the crowd are thinking. that's going to affect how I serve. So 1 minute, there's no pressure on me. There's no challenge with a crowd. Next minute, big group of players turn up. It's going to affect behavior. And then self-awareness. Yeah, I'm going to serve differently when I'm tired. I'm going to serve differently when I'm confident. I'm going to serve differently when I'm anxious. All this information we take in. But how often as tennis coaches do you take that into consideration when we're teaching? When we're trying to get these players to develop skill or technique? How often do we think about all these things? Very rarely, because isolated drills, we don't do any of this. We don't do any of it. We just make it really fluffy and we develop the technique within isolation. And then we wonder why it's not transferable. We wonder why we spend 40 minutes practicing the serve and the player gets the right technique, the correct technique, the fundamentals of technique. And then we put them into a match situation and then it disappears. They can't do it. Why? Because you've changed the environment. Therefore, you've changed the behavior. You've got to develop the behavior and the movements in the right environment. And we don't tend to do it as tennis coaches. So how can we make our practices more real? So I'm going to share with you just one video in a minute, but this is something that I use, and this is taken from ecological dynamics and constraint-led coaching, and it's been adapted from the representative practice design or representative learning design. And this is just a little thing that I use. So we've got a chart on the screen. We've got a score, 1 being the lowest, 4 being the highest. And we've got levels. So number 1 is low representative. And then we've got a little bit of sort of what that may look like. So low representative, there's little resemblance to the actual game or skill being trained. So in the clip that I showed you where the player is serving into an empty service box, an empty tennis court, yes, you may think it looks like tennis. There's a tennis player, there's a tennis court, and he's hitting a tennis shot. But it's not tennis because you need 2 players to play tennis. And like we said now in this stream, that once you introduce a returner, you're going to change the behavior and the performance of the player. You're going to change their movement solutions or their technique. We know from science that there's very limited transfer of training here. And coaches do it. And I've had it this week with shadow swings, if you were in that forum, which I'm unfortunately no longer a part of. I got into a great conversation about shadow swings. Okay, yeah, you've got a tennis racket, you're performing a tennis stroke, but there's very limited value in it. It's not going to transfer to training because it's not the real game. And coaches do it. And one of the coaches really kept banging on about, yeah, fundamental skills. Well, what are fundamental skills? Basic shapes, understanding how to move the racket. Well, what I said in that thread, if you were there, it was quite lively, was, well, we've all got fundamental movement skills. It's called human development. Like, I know to get something to go from low to high, I know I've got to move my body from low to high. Yeah, it's called physics. So I understand basic movement patterns. And coaches, for me, the fundamental argument is just a way to sell tennis lessons. Oh, yeah, you need to learn the basics. That's why you need to come to lessons with me, so I can teach you the basics. I'm pretty sure anyone in the world can pick up a tennis racket and play tennis without a coach. The issue is they'll make loads of mistakes because their range of movement, their variability of their movement solutions will be huge. They'll swing the racket in lots of multiple different ways trying to find the solution. So your job as a coach is to narrow down that variability in the movement solutions, not to teach him a movement solution. There's no such thing as one way to hit a forehand. And again, this is down to poor education from coaches, possibly. Coaches don't fully understand it. I think it's tradition as well, because we've been told and taught that there's a basic way to move. There's a basic way to hit a forehand, or in this case, a basic way to hit a serve. So we need to learn the basic way first before we make it more advanced. And then we have things like biomechanics play a part. Yeah, but you need to learn these biomechanical movements. Struggled to say that this week. I really need to teach them good biomechanics. And I've seen one coach this week do lots of posts on good technique, basic technique, sound technique. Well, what is good technique? Obviously, with biomechanics, we understand how the body will generate force. Yeah, things like ground reaction force, internal, external rotation, shoulder over shoulder rotation. We understand how the body can avoid injury. That's what biomechanics is. How each individual accomplishes that is different. That's why we have forehands and serves from the top players that will always look different, always be completely different. No tennis player in the world will serve the exactly same way. The elbow position will be different. The knee flexion will be different. How much drive they produce will be different. How much hip and shoulder rotation they'll generate will all be different. So there's no one way, and it really annoys me now when coaches have that view, because one, it's arrogance to think that they know the golden ticket. Do you reckon if there was one way, we'd all just do it, and then we'd have millions of unbelievable tennis players? And again, I think it's a breakdown in coach education, and I think it's also a breakdown with coaches. I put a great post out on Instagram this week, so I'm just going to close this curtain. There's actually sunny here in the UK for once. I put a post out on Instagram this week. As tennis coaches, do we need to learn how the body can move, or how we learn to move? And I think a lot of us focus on how the body can move. We don't understand how we learn to move. And it's not, we don't learn to move in these very rigid, isolated, sterile environments. That's why the low representative has very little training. And you can tell, because if you spend 40 minutes working on a shot or a skill or a technique, once you put it into a game, if that skill hasn't transferred, it's not down to the player. It's down to you. It's down to the coach. And I've been guilty of it in the past where I've blamed the player. Oh, you don't get it. You're not focusing. You've worked really hard for 40 minutes. Now you're not concentrating. It's not that. It's just my coaching wasn't very good. So that's a low representative. That's the most common thing I see. Now, again, I get it. If you've got a player who has really limited movement skill, so they haven't really played a lot of sport, if they're really, really low on confidence, then you may get them to serve into an empty box. That's fine. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying understand that there's very little value of skill development. It won't transfer into a game. But the longer you stay in that situation, the less value you get. And then we have moderate and high, which is 2 and 3. So moderate, some elements of the game or skill, context not incorporated. Transfer may be partial, and tasks may now involve some decision making. So we're starting to open it up a little bit more. So these are, again, great progressions to use. High representative, there's a strong resemblance to the game. The transfer is more likely now into performance, and the tasks involve decision-making, perceptual cues, contextual factors similar to those closer characters of the game. And then we have fully representative, where it really just looks and feels like a game of tennis. And for me as a coach, I really always want to be towards the top end of that. And the art of coaching is tailoring it to the player. Some players may have to be lower down the score, but I never want to be at a 1. Me personally, I never want to be at a 1. I want to try and avoid a 1. I want to try and be at the 2 to 4 range more often than possible. But I may start at a 2 and then open it up over a period of time and try and get it into a 4. So that's what I use. And these are my golden rules of play. So when you're setting up practices, so again, we're going to look at the serve here. There's got to be an environment for the player to interact and engage with. So that may be an object, an opponent. They may have to explore the space of the score. But it has to be an open environment, but stuff that the player interacts with. We've got to create visual or perceptual cues, which we looked at on the previous slide. The game has to present some decisions to make. Now, we've got to be careful with decisions, because if you give the player too many decisions, it may be overwhelmed. I always say it's like the all-you-can-eat buffet. If you go to the all-you-can-eat buffet, there's too much choice. You end up just getting a mixture of everything. It doesn't really work. So what you may have to do is give them some choices, and then as they get more skillful and more confident, you may then open it up and give them more choices to make. But there has to be an element of decision-making. There's got to be variability. There's got to be multiple solutions or multiple problems for the player to solve. There's not just one way to perform the task. You've got to give them multiple ways. Has to be competitive. We talked before. The score will have a huge effect on the environment. The environment will have a huge effect on behavior. Behavior will have a huge effect on the performance. So it's got to be competitive in some way. My role within all this is to set the problems. So I'm not telling the player how to serve. I'm not telling the player how to find the solution. I'm not telling them where to throw it, how to position their body. I'm setting up a task, and then the player has to solve the problem themselves. And that's the key to it. The coach is not the one giving the players the solutions. The player finds solutions himself. Now, a lot of coaches watching this will go, oh my God, that is absolutely nuts. That's crazy. But when players play matches, who makes the decisions? The player. The coach, you're probably not even there. You're back at the club making some money. The players out competing. They've got to make all the choices themselves. They've got to interact with the environment. They've got to make the big decisions. They've got to have and deal with the variability. They've got to deal with the competition. So why, when you coach your players, do you take all that away? And when you then send them off to a tournament, they're faced with all those things now, and they can't solve the problem because they don't have the solutions. Again, that's on you as a coach. That was on me as a coach. The amount of times I would do a training block with players and we'll spend 4 weeks working on technique. I'd send them away to compete for a couple of weeks, like the upcoming Easter holidays, 2 weeks of competition. The player may play 2-3 events. They come back after Easter and all that technique's disappeared. And I'd go mad at the player. Oh my God, we spent so much time working on this technique. You've gone away for 2 weeks and you've just gone back, or you've radically changed the movements, what you're doing. And in hindsight and reflection, it's pretty damning to my coaching, because I spent 4 weeks teaching something that the player couldn't replicate. It didn't stick under pressure. That's not down to the player. That's down to my bad coaching. So what I'm going to share now is just one example of how we can make the serve more realistic. And in the presentation itself, I'm not going to share the full presentation, unfortunately, but in the presentation itself, like, I share multiple ways in which we can do it. And I show how I'd add on different layers. So this is probably going to be number 2 on our representative practice design. So the first one was a low representative. Now this is number 2. So all I've done here, for those of you who can't see the screen, is I've just put a returner down the far end. I know, rocket science, right? But just by sticking a returner down the far end, the server now, one, it looks and feels a bit more like a tennis match, because in tennis you play with 2 players or possibly 4 players if you're playing doubles. So it looks and feels a bit more like tennis. They now have to look at the environment. So he'll be taking in perceptual cues here. He'll be taking in, and you can see him looking around if you're watching the clip. He's taking in the opponent's position. So for those of you who can't see the clip, the opponent, the returner, is pretty much in the middle of the service box. Yeah, so I've just told him there to maybe go a bit more out wide towards the inside tram line to try and protect his backhand. So that's going to give the look and feel a bit different to the server as well. He's also taken in the cues from the return. So if you see here, the player hits the serve, returner goes back short cross court. So that's probably what the server wants. They want that mid-court ball so they can properly step in and attack on the forehand. And he got that by serving out wide to the backhand. And interestingly enough, he goes back out that way on his next serve, but unfortunately it's a little bit wide. So he's not only looking at the opponent's position, but he's also now taking in the perceptual cues of the return. He knows now if his serve's efficient or effective. Without the returner, he hasn't got that information. And again, coaches, if you're doing a private lesson, you shouldn't be down the side of the player. You can't see anything. You can't feel anything. Yes, you may have a theory about biomechanics and what good looks like, but let's be honest, no one knows what good looks like for this player. Because this player, again, the guy in the clip, don't want to really guess his age, but I'm going to say late 20s. But like, he's got a lifetime of experience here. So he's got his own movement solutions anyway. It's going to be very difficult to broaden that range of variability with his movement. Again, we always think this with adults, especially, like, it's very difficult to teach adults technique. Yes, because they find their own movement solutions. They've already developed a acceptable range of movement. So if you're trying to do something completely outside of that range, it's really, really difficult and really, really challenging. So as a coach, the best place for you to be is the far end. Because you can then change your position to see how they interact with the environment. You may cover the tee, you may cover wide. You can also hit some returns as well. And that's going to give you an idea of how efficient and effective that serve is, because you're going to feel it on your racket. But then you can also give them problems to solve. So if they keep rolling the serve into your forehand and you keep smashing the forehand down the line into their backhand, okay, they're going to have to change how they serve. And in the rest of the presentation, I pretty much go through that as well. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So yeah, so that was sort of the introduction. I've probably gone a little bit longer than the actual presentation there, because the presentation, I had an hour and I had quite a lot of content to get through as well. But so I've probably gone into more detail here than I did actually on the presentation. But I'm just trying to make sense of why we coach the way we coach. Why do we have a server and no returner? Because everyone's done it. And again, one of my favorite pushbacks is, I seen a clip of Alcaraz doing it. I seen a clip of Coco Gauff. Coco Gauff does it. Alcaraz does it. Yeah. Okay. So the clips you're probably seeing, these are professional tennis players who have spent years developing their range of movement solutions. They play tennis every single day. And the clips you're probably seeing are probably at a practice court at an event. They're not developing skill at this stage. They're probably just warming up their shoulders. They're not working on anything technical. It is just a maintenance drill. And it blows my mind when people see videos or clips of pro players practicing and they take it out and they think they can transfer it to their young players back at the club. It's like watching Manchester United train, or whatever football team you support, Everton in my case. Like, you can't train professional athletes and recreational players the same way. It's two completely different levels. And they're doing it for completely different reasons. So it just blows my mind. It's interesting with Alcaraz because and I've tried. Very rare can you find clips of Alcaraz hitting serves without a returner. I tried to find some, but I couldn't when I did a Instagram video a few months back. Just because the pros are doing it doesn't mean it's right. Just because tennis coaches have done it for hundreds of years or 100 years now doesn't make it right. The science says it doesn't transfer. The psychology, the common sense should show it doesn't transfer. Your own coaching experience should tell you it doesn't transfer. I've said a few times on this stream, the amount of times I've spent 40 minutes working on a skill or a technique, put it into a match and it disappears. Spent 4 weeks working on a serve, player goes and competes, comes back serving completely different. Because humans, we adapt, we evolve. Think back to the escalator stairs and the motorway. We're adaptable creatures. When we walk, you walk in lots of different movement ways because you adapt to what's around you. If you come to a slope, you'll change how you walk. Down a slope, change how you walk. If it's a busy environment, your behavior is going to change how you walk. If it's a quiet environment, your behavior will change how you walk. It may be a bit slower pace. If you see someone that you don't like, you're going to change how you walk. Again, just basic psychology, but we don't take that in consideration. We believe as tennis coaches that players are like machines, and we can tell them and teach them very, very robotic ways of movement, and they'll just repeat those actions. This notion of repetition still exists within tennis coaching. Oh, if I repeat the action, it's muscle memory was another great quote that I seen this week on that Facebook thread. There's no such thing as muscle memory. Your body just adapts to the situation it finds itself in. So guess what? If you put the body, in this case, the server, in a situation that's challenging, they're more likely to use the same movement solutions in a match, because it doesn't have muscle memory. It just reacts and adapts to how it normally has dealt with that situation before. The muscles don't remember how it moves. The body remembers how it reacts and moves in certain situations. Goes back to my theory before. Do we understand how we learn to move and how the body actually moves under stress? Or are we just trying to follow this very basic, very easy, linear model of how to coach, how to serve? There you go. If you'd like to see the full presentation, along with the other presentation, how to develop skillful and adaptable players, I have just uploaded both of them onto my Coach Academy. So you can find my Coach Academy at mytenniscoaching.com. There's a monthly or annual subscription to join in, but there's loads of webinars on the ecological dynamics approach, constraint-led approach, and the stuff like downloads. There's a live coaches meetup every single month as well. And you've got over 200 downloadable practice designs that you can take to your club and develop. And we also have a worldwide tennis community. Hope you enjoyed today's live stream. Sorry, it's a little bit late. Hopefully you enjoyed that. It's a little bit different as well. Give you a bit of an insight to my keynote speech this week on the serve. And as always, I'm going to say it. I'm not saying this is how you coach, but hopefully it gives you things to think about, and you may address the big question. Why do you coach why do you coach the way you do? Until next time.